Thank you for joining us for our continuing and phenomenal series of conversations with Femme Futurists around the world. It's been, I posted on LinkedIn over the weekend that this is literally the thing that's kept me sane during the last 6 months, is that every week I get to have a conversation with someone like you that makes me realize that, you know, A, I'm inspired, but I also learned something, and I feel like I'm connected to people who are doing this amazing work. I'm not out here doing it all by myself, right? And we can contribute to each other. So Karen Sands, thank you so much for being part of our conversation. And I'm excited we get to introduce people to your work, because it's a very specific vein of it that I think that we don't spend enough time talking about, but it's clearly going to have a huge impact for all of us now and into the future, which is around the idea of aging and longevity. But if we want to back up, I mean, you know, the resumes for all of you all are so long and extraordinary that it's hard to put them into a little nutshell. But, you know, you are obviously a person who puts this thinking into action in so many different ways. So do you want to give us a little bit of a background of to how you got to where you are and how you describe your work these days?
Well, I think a personal experience is what flipped the switch rather for me. But I started out being a feminist, really, an educator and then a feminist in the 60s, one of the early ones.
Thank you.
Yeah, starting centers and enlightening each of us. It was a great time. And during that time, I decided that I wanted to do something more than just giving back to the women I was with and that I was really educating and leading forward. And it was a fabulous time, and all different ages of women, by the way. But I didn't really get that at that time. So I then started a business, and I said I wanted to bring women who were home back into the workforce. And that was the first business I started. I knew nothing. I just did it on the fly and went for it. And what I've realized looking back is every part of my career, every part, has been cause related. I've been cause driven the entire time. And once I got hold of that, and that's a biggie for everybody, I think, once you get hold of that's what you're about, it's so much easier to know which threads to follow or strands to follow, right?
Exactly.
In any case, from that, there was a personal decision, which I won't go into now, but my story is the story of boomers, of a boomer woman. And the choices we made, the early boomers, we had to make as feminists and as women to speak up and to go against the system, or at least to try to bypass the system. I was successful in many ways. I rose to the top, but I also fought a custody case that no one wants to know about because it was atrocious. It was one of the biggies of that era. But the point of it was that we had to sacrifice to really step forward and have our voices be heard. So out of that experience, I made a decision that I wasn't going to let anything stop me along the way, that whatever it was I was supposed to follow, I was following it. And that following took me then into corporate America. And my reason at the time was, one, to prove that women were unstoppable and you couldn't keep us down. And I was proof of that. But it was also to support an international custody case. There was that reality too at the same time. So I walk into this big corporation in financial services of all places. I mean, I could never have imagined that I would end up in financial services. Oh, by the way, when I was an educator, it was in science. So there was nothing related to this. You know, I had no.
So I'm just going to back up. So educator, you said it was middle school and high school for a while?
Yes. And I was district school chairwoman. I didn't understand the implications or the importance. I was 22.
Oh my God.
And I was out in California, and they let me do everything I wanted for the school district science departments, all of them. So it was a great time. It's probably one of my favorite times, actually, because I was leading and collaborating with people way older than I was. I was 22, that had been in education a very long time.
Yeah.
As well as the other young upstarts. So it was a great time. So yes.
Fascinating, right? So from that and then to entrepreneurism and then into this corporate world in the financial industry in which you pioneered.
Well, and in between the entrepreneurism was the women's movement, because that, if I hadn't done that, I don't know if I would have gone in this direction. I don't know if it would have led me that way. And I don't know if the strand about women would have started so early. I just didn't recognize it, early on. So yeah, so I ended up in corporate. And that was quite the trip, because I decided I didn't know what I wanted to do. Who was I going to go work with? What was I going to do? I was doing all these entrepreneurial and great things. And now what, right? So I spent 9 months interviewing top CEOs, all kinds of leaders, board members. And this is before networking was in that formal way. And I met some fabulous, fabulous people. Now, who could turn down a woman? I was, in my mid-20s, and I was coming and saying, oh, yes, tell me all you know. I mean, they just opened it up. So I learned everything that people take 40 years in a career, I learned in a matter of 9 months. It was fabulous. Of what choices to make. They were incredibly giving.
How many of those were women that you interviewed out of that range?
I think most of them were men.
Yeah. So you learned what they did.
Back then, there weren't a lot of
No, but what I'm saying is I am just qualifying though. You learned how to do things from their perspective, which I do think is not the only perspective.
Which also then helped me navigate those waters, which were really, really murky and filled with sharks. There was no doubt about it. And, but the good thing was I didn't know anything about the golden handcuffs. And for anybody that doesn't know what that means, is once you get into a corporate and you get all these goodies and bennies and retirement plans, whatever, you don't want to give up those. So they're called the golden hand. In fact, I gave one of my executive leader clients a gift last year of a bracelet of golden handcuffs, so that she would always see it and know not to get caught in it. So, I mean, it's really important.
Yeah, no. I know many people who are in that, and it's designed to be that way, right? They give you options to, mature and invest in the future, and they pay you that way.
Definitely. Yeah. And it can serve people on both sides, but it's just not the way of the world today. There is no security anywhere, so it means nothing really. But anyway, so I come into this corporation, and I sold a bill of goods. I said, look, I've been a leader, I've been an entrepreneur, I know, and they said, oh, great, because we have the love of the, what was he then? I think he was senior VP within the pensions department. That department is the biggest part of the company, the pensions area. And I went, okay. And that's where I was hired into. I had not a clue what it was. The last thing I heard about a pension was something teachers got, but I was too young to care about when I was an educator, right? Suddenly I was thrown into this incredible world of retirement planning and plans and designs and the whole bit. But I brought in all of my marketing background. But the best part was, because I wasn't attached to the golden handcuffs, nothing fazed me. Nobody could, bully me, because it just didn't matter to me. So I'll tell you the story, because this is what's gotten me through as a futurist the rest of my life. Is one, they trained me as a futurist, because I had to understand the trends that were going to impact retirement and aging. And
good for them. Because a lot of industries back then were not doing that yet, and we're not connecting those dots. So good for them.
Especially to a woman. They were definitely not doing this, but I did. And so I started working with this guy, and the first job was director of marketing, sales, and something or other, right, for this whole new entity that was being formed. I was really on the seat of my pants, totally. Anyway, so we have this big meeting coming up where we're presenting what we're going to do with this, the senior VIPs big plan. This is his baby product line, right? We go in and everybody's freaked out about this guy. And I'm like, why is everybody so scared? I mean, like dead silence in the room. The door opens up, and I'm sitting across from the door for whatever reason. But I was placed there. The door opens in, and this little munchkin of a guy comes in, right? And they are freaking. They are so nervous. He says hello to everybody, tells them all to sit down, and he sits down, and he goes like this to me across the table. I went, what did he just do? And I realized he winked. He literally winked at me. It wasn't because I was cute or whatever at the time. Yes, of course. But nah, that wasn't it. He was cluing me in, just chill out. Just chill out. Do your thing. And I'll never forget it. Never, ever forget that experience. So that's why you still have to be open to men as your mentors. It's not just the women. Anyway, so he goes on and they go on and they start talking and he asked me opinion. And long story short, I said, I thought the plan was the worst I've ever seen. It wasn't going to work. It was a mistake to do it and his dream would be lost. That's in essence what I did. No golden handcuffs. You can say whatever you want, right? So he basically said, okay, I hear you. You've got, it was either 24 or 48 hours to come up with a replacement plan. I did. I don't know how I did. And then my boss, the one between me and this senior VIP, got another job like a week later, was out, and I was now directly reporting to the senior VP.
Wow. So I just have to ask a whole bunch of questions around, like, we talk a lot about these days around imposter syndrome, Karen, and people not feeling like they are able to step into a job that they don't know very well, or into new technology that they're unfamiliar with, or a new role, right? How did you combat that? I mean, I think there's a sort of personal moxie, right, and confidence.
I was just going to say, yeah, I think some of it's in your DNA, but I think we can learn some of it by trusting ourselves. That's the biggest part, and trusting that we really do know something. You know, it's not just what we learned in school. We also have insight, as well as the foresight you and I apply, but there's insight too. And that part of that insight is we're here for a purpose. We're here on this planet to do something. So let's find out who we are and get to it, and especially now. So I think that's a lot of it. It's what some people would call desire. I might call it passion, but then it all comes down into a vision, right? So, you know, you had spoken before, and I realized that one of my earliest drivers when I was an educator, and why I went into education, was I wanted to reach and open up that untapped potential. And that's never changed. I realize that even as a coach, right? We both are. That's never changed. That's always been there. Yeah, yeah. And we don't have time for a lot of the stories, but I love stories and I'm a storyteller. So, and some of them are really perfect for this. But, well, maybe I should, because I think it's a gift.
You know what? Like, we've got, what, about 40 minutes? And we know we're supposed to go over.
Yeah, and
because I think what's fascinating is to hear how people have, because I think that the journey that you are on, or have been on and continue to be on, is relevant as people are trying to navigate theirs, right? Yes. And what are some of the signposts of that, or what were some of the moments of clarification, or what were some of the lessons that you learned along the way? You know, I have a couple of them in my background where you're just like, that moment really seared this way of thinking or doing or being or confidence. And mine are much more positive than they were negative. I have very few stories about places where I shouldn't have been and was reprimanded for what I was doing. I always got this amazing opportunity to go do something next. Right. And I think this idea of, again, curiosity and wonder, which I'm sure we'll get to, is part of the driver of that. But yeah, so tell us a story.
Yes. Okay. So there's a fairy tale of a princess. Let's call her Gretchen. I think it was Veronica or something, but let's call her Gretchen. So Gretchen's around 10 or 11, and she's not allowed, as in most fairy tales, she's not allowed to go up to the top of the castle. No way. And she must stay with her nanny. And this goes on and on and on. And she's so, of course, therefore wants to go up to the tower. And finally, one night, she's able to slip out, and her nanny's asleep and doesn't see her. And she goes up, and it's way up the towers. And she gets up there. There's this big, heavy door. She pulls this little thing, pulls on the door, and it creaks. And as she opens up, she sees, oh, there's this old woman sitting at a spinning wheel, spinning away. And she walks in and says, "Can I come in?" "Oh, yes, I've been waiting for you a very long time." And she comes in and she's, "Oh, what are you doing?" And she teaches her how to spin. So every night she keeps coming back. And finally she tells her that she's her great ancient grandmother, and that she has been waiting a long time for her to come. And she wants her to know that the thread that she's spinning, the golden thread that she's spinning, is the thread of her soul, and she is to follow that thread for the rest of her life. And she gives her the thread to roll out before her. That's the message for all of us. That thread, each of us, nobody has the same thread.
I know.
Right? And so if we just follow it, and stop using our logic so much. Just follow the thread. It knows where it's taking us. When that happens, and I'll share it more as we go further today, but when that happens, everything happens. Everything starts opening up. It's when you don't follow it that you hit the wall.
Why do you think, so I 100% agree with you on that, right? And I do think that, it took me, I think I always had that curiosity, but I'm not sure I was able to define it. And it wasn't until probably like 6 or 8 years ago when I got really clear what I think my purpose on the planet is, and all those things, to your point, the decisions and the priorities become much clearer. But I always had an intuition kind of where I was going to be, or at least was led to the next place with that sense of curiosity. But why do you think so many people feel so lost around it? Like there are so many people, I get this.
Educated. It's how we're educated. It's how we're brought up from the day we land on the planet. Don't do
educated not just inside the school system, but also in culture.
Oh, we're enculturated, whether it's in the school system or at home or in the outside society. Yeah, don't do that. You might lose. You might risk. Don't do that. Right?
I know. I was really fortunate. I stumbled on a parenting philosophy in California when I was raising my 3 children that was all about self-directedness and really teaching kids to learn their own sense of curiosity. And it was really hard. It was like kind of, if you go to a museum and if your kid just wants to spend the whole time playing with a little train, like you let them just do the train, and even though drag them to all the other things that you want to drag them to, but you're like,
right.
Wow, like really? And I remember spending an hour and a half, like pushing my kid on a swing once. I'm like, but if you really are connected to what it is that they're connected to, and even if you decide that you want to take them to the rest of the museum, then at least you acknowledge that and say, I know that you love this train, but there are a few other things I want to take you around the museum to see if you love as much. And if not, we can come back to the train. Right. I don't think that you have to only be focused, but that was such an epiphany for me to be able to like really let my child guide their curiosity.
Because it's so hard as an adult to come back to find that again. You have to have people like us to help people do that, but it's still difficult because
it's really hard.
Piled onto it. Yeah.
But I totally agree. I gave a talk once and I talked about curiosity being our curiosity, our unique sense of questioning things, as unique as our thumbprints, right? Or our fingerprints. Like none of us have the exact same brain and have the exact same experiences. And my story on that, just quickly, is I was at a TED conference once, and there was a woman who was giving a very long talk about how dolphins communicate with one another. And I just thought, you know what? I could care less. Like, I think it's super duper cool that she thinks it's really great. And I'm sure it's got really all kinds of implications, but I just remember thinking, I literally have zero interest. And then I thought, oh my God, if she can be that passionately curious about that, like what is my equivalent? Like she must be doing that. I must have something on the planet that adds as much value that comes from my curiosity. And it literally gave me confidence to go find my own.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Oh, so
we all find it, how sometimes it can be in the reverse. I just remember so clearly though, being there in the hallway going, literally don't care, and fascinated by the fact that I didn't.
That's so super.
We find our thing. But I think, okay, so now you've so take us now to Futureland. Like where are you?
No, not yet. So now I'm in corporate and I've got this major business that I'm running, and it sailed. It's so great. It was fabulous. My career was solid. But the men along the way were not so nice. And the women in drag, as I call that archetype, were even worse. Mm-hmm. So you have to be prepared for that if you're going to be a trailblazer, which is you have been, I have been, and that's, I think all futurists are trailblazers. You have to, they're the same. It has to be. You have to be prepared for that, and you have to know that's coming. Yeah. And you have to really, it's a new level of trust and checking people out, not just automatically giving it away, which we as women are taught to do all the way up the line, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you have to be very careful, and we have to learn that early. And especially women in futuring have to learn that early.
Well, I think it's a
minority.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I think that what's tricky about being a woman and a futurist, which is one of the reasons that we really love this series and why I think these conversations increase so much confidence, not just for others who hear, but for people who want to also pursue, right? We need more women on stage. We need more women in companies. We need more women as authors.
Absolutely.
We need more women as VCs and inventors and entrepreneurs, et cetera. So, one of the tricky things is that, when you see, this has a lot to do with Carol Gilligan and understanding risk and all that stuff. But the idea is that, men can step into something and know 60% of it and be like, totally cool. Kind of like you did with the pensions that day, right? And often women are socialized to believe that we need to know 125% of it before we even utter a word about this, right? So to be someone who is standing at the precipice of the unknown and the ambiguous and have a point of view on that is it's kind of tricky business.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So that's why I really applaud so many of the women. That's why it was so fun to put this whole collection together. Like, look at all the women who had the confidence to stand on the edge of the unknown.
Exactly. And you bring me back to one of the earlier APF, Association of Professional Futurists, and I'm so glad that they started and we needed them. But the first meeting I went to, there were, I think, 2 or 3 women total. Out of, I don't know, maybe 40 people, 50 people. And I remember seeing them at the cocktail. That's the image I still remember. And it was so daunting when I saw that. And I was one of the older ones then too. So it was like, this is not okay.
Right.
This is not a male field. This is all of our field. And, yeah. And there was a lot of pushback, by the way, about women in even APF way back. Not now, but wait. Well,
I was going to say, I mean, I am very grateful for the work that y'all did, because by the time I got into business, it really wasn't so awful. I will say tech was different. Like when I went from marketing and advertising, which is where I started my career, it was actually very open. We saw women leaders in all ranks of it. They were CEOs of the agency. They were my bosses. They did flexible work stuff. Like it was like I got really, really, really well inculcated into business in the early days. But then when I switched over and ended up working more in tech and in AI and all that stuff more recently, like within the last 10 years, I have to say that's where it was really eye-opening. That's where the problem really exists. I mean, it's quite extraordinary.
Anything with tech and science and engineering, et cetera, that's...
Yeah, and that's where the future is going. I mean, so this for me is the big concern, right? If we were all going to go become, artists and entrepreneurs, then, or artists and caregivers, like that's awesome. But the fact is the productivity of the future will be driven by these technology and science endeavors. And whether again, as a scientist or as an entrepreneur or as a funder, right? Women have to be participating at all these levels in order to be able to be guiding it safely and be getting rewarded for it.
Exactly.
Right. So I do
and because we have more insight, so we have to be leading it.
Yeah. I mean,
just the foresight, it's the insight part that I
totally. And again, I always think about that there are 2, I would talk a lot about what does the future need and expect, right? And it is to be bold and visionary and challenging and unconventional and all the things that I think that men or masculine energy, I would say not so much men versus women, but masculine energy does, propel us to, both as men and women. But then there is this whole other side of it, which is the connecting of the dots piece and the insight piece of it and the empathy piece of it and the holding people well in it, that I think
that's our developmental goal, is to bring those 2 together into a sacred marriage of a whole being so we can have whole organizations. I mean, it's just so simple. It really is. It's not simple to implement, but the concept is just so simple.
No, I know. How come nobody else is? Well, I shouldn't say nobody, but not enough. Well, so I guess the question is, do you think we've made progress in all that time? Karen, where do you think we've made progress and where do you think we haven't made progress? We haven't even talked about your Giordano futurism work yet, but I just think with the perspective you have, where have we leapt ahead and where are we sadly still lagging or even reversing?
Well, I think we're skipping around, but that's right. That's what women do anyway. So it's fine. We're relational. So I think that's what COVID has done. It's put us back even worse than the Great Recession. So, it's last in, first out. So I think a lot of women are going to be suffering a push out, and we have to push back. Now, what that looks like and how we show up is certainly at the voting booth for sure. But it's also in how we decide what's important to us, what are our core values. It's the whole thing all over again. It's the reevaluation, reinvention, transformation of those years, back after the Great Recession, and now again, but more so. And in my view, boomers especially really got taken down to the knees of the Great Recession because we had it all. We could do it all. We had it all. Nothing was going to stop us. We can break every paradigm that had to be broken. And suddenly we were, wow, if we weren't down on our knees, we knew close people to us that were, right? And so we started reevaluating, or 9/11. It was the same kind of process. I feel like for many, many, many years, I've written and spoken about what other futurists have too. I'm not the only one, about, the great shift, the great transition, the great whatever. To me, I am a scientist, so I go back to Prigogine, to dissipative structures. I always do. It's one of my favorite models around how I view life and how things happen. So we are either going to break through, shake up and break through to another state of being, a level of evolution we haven't been at before, collectively, or we're going to go down the tubes. That's it. It's one or the other. It's not either, not, it was both and for a while, but then it's one or the other, right? So that's how I look at everything. So we have to be ahead of that. So if women now have to say, okay, if that's what's coming, I better figure out who I really am and in what world I want to play in. And is the rewards of corporate where it is? It may be. Is it the rewards as an entrepreneur? Maybe. As a futurist? Maybe. But what it comes back down to is, what is your wonder and curiosity all about? Why are you here and what do you want to do about it? And sometimes it's not so easy. As I started to say, I said, yes, I was untapping potential, and that I've done throughout my life, but I didn't know where that was going to take me. Why did I end up being, a school district chairwoman at 22 with older people? Why did I end up, when I went into corporate, being in retirement planning and studying aging? It just, none of it made sense, but it was like, okay, it was cool. But what it really got me into was also studying the trends of women and aging, because that no one was really talking about a heck of a lot back then.
I don't think very many people are talking about it now. Yeah. So, so shall we shift now to the,
well, what happened out of that is when I went through all of this in corporate, and there are a lot of stories there, we don't need to go to that, would be very telling for another time. But when I got out, I remember I was deciding, what did I want to do with my life? And wait, no, this was before I went into corporate. Actually, it was right before I went into corporate. I'm sorry. I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do next when I left my ex. And that's what it was. And my mom called me up on the phone, and I was at home with the two little toddlers at the time, with one of those long phones on a cord, right? And I picked it. Hi, Mom, what's up? I have to speak to you. I said, well, aren't you on your way here? Yes, I have to speak to you. I said, what's up? And she said, I drove into a toll booth. I said, you did what? I was 26. She was 28. She was 59. I drove into a toll booth. I said, why did you do that? What a silly question, but why did you do that? Because the voices on the radio told me to. Because the voices on the radio told me to. It was in that split moment I knew I was losing my mom. She was one of the early women who was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, early onset Alzheimer's. So remember, I'm 28. That changed my trajectory for the rest of my life of what does it mean to be a woman then? What does it mean to be an older woman? What does it mean to be an older adult? And that kicked off everything else thereafter, both in corporate and thereafter. I've forgotten the most important thing I wanted to tell you, because that story is what changed my trajectory. Even though the strands were there, I didn't really see them until that began to happen. And I had to question, who am I and who will I be? That led to a study that I did. I went back to school. What I did was I left corporate, left this out, and I decided that a bunch of different happenings, which I won't go into now, we don't have time, happened that said, you belong studying this. So I went back, I went to Hunter, and I got my postmaster's in adult development and aging.
Oh, fascinating.
That was in 92 or 3. And then I did a study. I interviewed over 100 women over the age of 60. I didn't want anybody younger because I could get a handle on that, but I couldn't get a handle on 60 and after. So I ended up having these phenomenal experiences interviewing women who were not necessarily on the radar. Some were under the radar, some were above the radar. And that book became, I don't know if I took that out to show you. No, I didn't. Visionaries Have Wrinkles. Oh, it's a great book. And I set it up as interviews so that you would feel like you were in the room with me. And then I took things from that book that they spoke that I thought women needed to hear about, and men in the women's lives. And that became the card deck. So that was another part where I just said, okay, I'm really in this thing. Nobody's talking about this. At that time, my peers didn't want to hear about it. They were, early boomers also talk about aging. Who wants to hear about that stuff? So I kind of went underground for a while with it and kept doing my work as a master coach, et cetera, et cetera. And then I said, no, it's time. I have to come out. And I went and did a speaking. This is the kind of things people have to watch out about the wonder and the messengers. I went to an advanced professional speaking gig out in Arizona just to, take it to another level. And when I was asked, because we were being recorded, that each of us had to come up with what was nobody knew about, which was our deepest desire that we would speak about. I couldn't believe it. So it was my turn, and I get up and I start talking about the crone and what it means to be a crone and what it means to be a crone's journey for a woman, and the crone in men and women. When I ended, there was dead silence. And I thought, oh no, I just blew it. The dead silence broke out into applause because these were all people that were above the age of 40, right? They were all advanced professionals. They were feeling and dealing with their own aging issues, but there was no place to be about it, talk about it, hear about it, really. So that conversation, I came home and I said, that's it. This is my work, and I'm not leaving it. And that has stayed that way for all these many years.
I was going to say that keeps you gainfully employed, my friend.
So, but that journey was not easy though, because no one else wanted to hear about this for a long time. So I want people to know to keep to it, keep to that dream. Don't let it go. If you know that's yours.
You definitely learn a body of insight and whatever you want to call it, a experience that becomes really useful at a moment when people suddenly pay attention, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So you're far ahead on that. So I think that if we can just turn a little bit to where you're looking at the statistics, like my colleague Emma and I were doing this project about the future, 50 years from now. And you spent a lot of time thinking about the fact that theoretically now there's this whole conversation that aging is just a technology problem, that we're going to be able to figure out how to crack the DNA code or figure out whatever it is, the chemistry code that holds us together. And at some point within 10 or 15 or 20 years, we will be reversing it. In some ways, we will be live longer than every year we're here, we're 2 years longer on the planet. So do you believe that?
All of those stats changing. For one thing, the prediction wall is no longer that far out. It's more like a 20 to 25 year prediction wall that we can say, okay, we can predict today what we think is going to happen in 20 to 25 years. And I also tell people all the time, I hope it's okay to say it here, that if you hear a futurist making a prediction, go in the opposite direction.
Oh, yeah. No, we cannot.
All right, because we can't. That's ridiculous. We don't have crystal balls. And I learned that from one of the greats. Dr. Deming was my mentor. And he taught me early on, you cannot make predictions. The past is no indication of the future.
True, but you can have an imagination. Like you think about the great science fiction.
Imagination. That's the difference, though, that we have to, because we as futurists, so many get so caught up in the predictive side that we lose sight of that yes, we can imagine. We can frame a whole new story. And that's what my work is about, is creating a whole new story of our age. And our age meaning AGE capitals, epic, as well as chronological age. So to answer your question, I don't know that anyone can really honestly answer those questions, because I can't project beyond 20 to 25 years. And with what COVID has done, I've written 12 books, and the last 4 or 5 have all been on this topic, variations of, and I have definite stats and trends and what I see happening, especially for women and the future and aging, which I am still very positive about. But when I look at what happened with COVID, I don't know what's going to happen to those numbers. Right? And in fact, I've been trying to reach to others in the aging field, peers of mine, and saying, hey, what do we do with these numbers now? We talked about, some of the projections that I talk about all the time, I have them here. We thought there were going to be 5 million new jobs in 2020, and 60% of them for 60-year-olds and above. So, and we were talking about personal care would be up 50%. I don't know now. I really can't tell you that, right? Do I still believe that women will be on the forefront of the longevity economy? Yes, absolutely we will be, both as consumers, but also as the providers and the innovators and leaders. I have absolutely no doubt about that. That hasn't changed. But as to how many dollars will equate to the longevity economy now?
Yeah. I guess I'm thinking more like if you put your imagination hat on for a moment, do we imagine that we will at a time where we will stop aging, or that we will age to 120 or 150 or?
I do think that we have enough, and this is again my old background in science and biology as well. I do believe that we have what it takes, and will have what it takes. It may be very expensive for a very long time, but at some point, yes, we will have the technology, the medical knowledge and know-how, to extend our lives. And I mean, right now, we know you can live to 117, so that's not like out of question. My two best favorite, most beloved mentors, one is 102 and the other is 104.
Wow.
And they are so sharp. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, one's a woman, one's a man. So we know that capability is there. And you know, let's face it, I go to an osteopath. Why? Because I want to stay flexible and able to get and do what I want in life. Well, it's the same thing. If somebody has a shot I can take or a pill I can take, I'm going to do it. And that's going to be true for all of us. What I worry about is we're going so medical and so mechanical almost, that we're forgetting the soul of the being that we're trying to keep alive. And if we keep all of us alive, we better be damn well ready to have a place for all these people.
That's, I guess, the question, right? It starts to raise all these questions from a social and economic perspective about what we want the quality of all of our lives to look like.
And is that why we're going into space, so that we can end up putting people there and leaving the old ones on this earth? I don't know. I hope that's not the case.
Oh, I don't like that story.
I know. But if you think about how these things can play out, we have to really have a rein on what we're talking about, because we're talking about gene therapy, we're talking about the very DNA of who's in charge of all of this.
I know.
Right?
That's
Yeah.
a really huge, I mean, that's a huge question, right, around all that. But then I think, again, bringing back your retirement and pension work, right, we're wholly underfunded in the current structure to age.
Yeah.
Male or female, but particularly female, actually, even more so.
Yeah.
So the question is how, you know, if you were going to like bring in, again, all this experience and you were in some sort of public policy role, like, can we see what some of the interventions are? Like for me, I worry so much about the fact that we're going to have technological displacement of work. And I spent a lot of time thinking about what would be the societal scaffolding to be able to hold us well in that. Like, how do we redefine work? How do we define our worth? How do we make sure that we can have a roof over our heads? Like, I think a lot about that in the whole society. But when you think about it in plus 20 years or plus 50 years on this planet or another, how do you imagine what those structures could be or need to be? Like, how we need to be thinking about that?
Sometimes I do when I think about like Alzheimer's and what are we doing with dementia and Alzheimer's, for a vast majority, and they're going to be a lot of us. And where are we sending them? And I can take it personally, obviously, because my mother's had it, but I also have it with other relatives that are institutionalized. It's a dreadful, horrific way to leave this planet, to leave the rest of your life behind like that. No. So we have to find other ways. Whereas overseas, I just forgot where it is, whether it was in Copenhagen. I'll find out. I can't remember the country now, but one of those countries, or maybe Denmark. Anyway, they have these communities that are like real live little towns.
Yeah.
That are self-contained. And those with the disease are not feeling left alone, or it's just a beautiful way of making a terrible disease.
But even some of them, I remember, if I like, they actually even go back in time, like they set up like a 1950s town, like the places where this age group would remember really feeling secure and safe, as opposed to making it a modern
to go have coffee, sit with friends, even if you don't remember who they are, but it's people, it's all those things, going grocery shopping, if you're doing it yourself. It's just the way it needs to be.
That's actually really stunning. I hadn't thought about that. So I'm setting
the
up
whole world can do this.
There's last week in The Economist, there's a whole special section on dementia. And it's got 3 or 4 articles around it, because it's raising the same question you are, or the alarm that you are, that this is going to be a huge and growing problem. Like, it's great that we can sit around talking about aging forever, but the combination of the physical well-being and financial well-being are really huge issues that we're not prepared for. So, And then the caregiving often falls on, you know, the younger generation.
It's usually on women. Yeah,
Uh,
it's not that men don't have that responsibility, they do, but it usually falls on women.
right.
So COVID is only highlighting all of that. You've got women home, the YouTube, homeschooling, right? Remote work, and then caregiving an elderly parent or relative or whatever friend, it doesn't matter. We have to be talking about this. We have to find new solutions of how we want this society to care for not only its underserved and you know, suffering, but also the older part of that group. I mean, we have to do something.
So
It's
as
all of our parents and sisters and brothers and aunts. I mean, it's not some strangers we're talking about anymore.
No, I know. And so there's like two conversations I want to have with you at once. We have
Yes.
so little time left, but I'm going to try and we'll see
Okay, yeah.
the first one
Go ahead.
quickly, which is this week's Economist headline was talking about the American election and about the tug of war between young and old.
Yes.
Right.
One of the concerns I have, very big one I have, and I've been working towards bringing that together. I believe that so much of that gap, the generational gap, which I do talk about a lot, is because of the media. I do not believe there's really a gap. And if you look, especially between boomers and millennials, I don't know enough about Zoomers yet, but I know they're even more so like millennials, you know, maybe
well, I'm going to say they're more extreme in a whole
another rendition of it, but yeah, but certainly the millennials and the boomers, our values are so similar. The things that we cared about are so much aligned that to make there a gap that doesn't have to exist is utterly ridiculous. Besides the fact of all the generations, and I know people in my generation, we don't like labeling generations, but as marketers and as, you know, we have to demographic this. So boomers, we are so needed now because we've been through hell several times and we picked ourselves up and rebuilt again and kept the American values as a generation, basically, right? So the younger generations, they have the magic, they have the imagination, they have the, you know, they're not tethered, and they've dropped a lot of the garbage that we had. But what they don't have is the experience of resilience, of rebuilding, of recreating, of transformation. They just don't have it. Can't because they haven't matured that much yet. They don't have the capacity yet that years bring with it. It's just the way it is.
And it's interesting because, you know, again, the stat that I've been really about and talking to a lot of people about is the level of anxiety, depression, and even suicide among 18 to 24-year-olds right now. It is, we knew it was an epidemic going into this, and it's only gotten worse. The latest New York Times report, which I'm sure that from research studies somewhere, you know, almost 63% of kids, I say kids, young adults, are experiencing anxiety and depression, and 25%, Karen, are contemplating quite serious suicide. Right. So when you start to imagine, like all of a sudden I start thinking about interventions, like my brain immediately goes to how
that's the collaboration.
And that's what I was going to say, is if kids could be in company of people who have been through this before. And I've been thinking a lot about it. What was it like in the 60s? What was it like to live through when Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated and the president was assassinated and his brother was assassinated? I mean, that's what's been horrifying times, right? McCarthyism, like there are many times that we have, and that's just in the US, I'm sure globally, you know, there's many more atrocities that we can certainly unfortunately talk about resigning.
Need the team people across generations.
I'm suddenly in that like camp with you. All of a sudden, I hadn't really thought through what a solution could be, but that suddenly feels like a really, really relevant one.
One of the things, well, you asked me, I don't know if I can jump ahead to your number 3, the implications, but one of the driving things that I've wanted to do for a long time, and it's a big deal, so I had to keep building up to this, is that I've been behind the curtain, especially the last year, dreaming up and envisioning and putting legs on a new academy. And it's called the Ageless Way Academy. And it is about this whole topic because I want to bring this knowledge to professionals because then you can take it out. So you have to know about this. And so I'm including Gerofuturism in there, which is my whole world of where I brought together gerontology and futurism. That's really where it came together. It's really that simple. Because it's so needed. So I'm now in conversation, I'm so excited, with a major institution that is basically putting me in an incubator if you would, to make this happen. So it's happening. We're planning our launch in the spring. So it's very, very exciting with a whole slew of courses and offerings and services all around this topic. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Well, that seems like a really good way to wind this up then, because that is what I'm really curious about. Is like, what are you doing now that is, propelling this work?
That's my legacy. I want to bring this out to as many people as I can to shake this up. And one of the things I do a lot of in the workshops, we're going to confront our own inner ageism, because that's part of this problem. And it's being exacerbated by society. It's just out there. So all the demons inside are now seeping out, and we have to confront this. Ageism is the last ism that we have to tackle.
Right.
And like all the other isms, the polarity, the opposite side, it's a tremendous asset. And what I want young people is to stop and think is longevity. What are they doing with the next 100 years? Mm-hmm. What do you want to do with your life?
I know, but if they believe
10 years.
I know, but I will say it, if they believe that the future is dark and scary, to your point, I think they feel more about that implosion versus the idea that we're going to reach another level of consciousness, right? So if they're
want to reach them,
it's all going to go downhill, right? Then they, A, don't believe, A, I don't want to be around 100 years, and B, there's not a place for me in it.
Right. And I say, full hunky. We have to reframe it with them. We have to reframe it.
Yeah, no, that's
just
that's
a
really
story.
what I'm passionate about.
Yeah, and me too. Because that's just a story. It's which story, it's just like scenarios. Which scenario do you want to hang your hat on? I go aspirational. So.
Right, but we have to build those pieces and make it real, right? So it can't just be wishful thinking. I do think that orientation is what keeps us strong. But I think to your point, we need to vote that way. We need to think about the policy, think about all the changes you made as a school administrator at that young age that made that system work better. I think we need to make the system work better. Exactly. Right. So I think I'm working more on the systemic level, and you're working more on the individual level, making sure that people feel really like they have the capacity.
Yeah. Well, I'm doing both and. That's what's finally coming together in the academy, is that I'm working with enterprises as well as individual professionals to take.
That's awesome.
So yeah, and credentialing. So this really gets out there.
Oh, I'm excited. Okay, cool. Well, we'll have to come back and revisit this then in spring when you launch to make sure that the world knows about it.
I truly believe that adult development and aging / longevity, they are the new age careers. And young people can dive into this. Innovation is exploding. There's so much need. It's sort of like going out into space is going into age. We're going to bring back all of that to all the generations.
All right. Well, I can't think of a better place to land this plane.
Thank you. As I do my moonshot.
No. I think it's good. I'm going to land the rocket, I should say. No, I think it's great. Again, I'm so inspired by the work that everyone does, but particularly you. Thank you for all that you've contributed across this time. And
I love what you're doing. This is great.
You know, it's again, I keep teasing this a side hustle at this point because we've got other stuff that we're doing, but it is keeping me sane. It is keeping me inspired. It keeps you, I think all of us hit a wall where we go for a minute, like, what are we doing? Is this all so big? I literally partly was late to the call for a second because I was on the phone with a friend who is an extraordinary creator in the world of virtual reality and augmented reality. She's a very, very successful entrepreneur. She's built some amazing things in the last 4 months. And she's just talked about how she hit the wall for a bit and just sort of went really, really quiet. You know, like no matter how optimistic we are and how passionate we are and how well connected we are, we do hit our walls.
The reality is still there. I mean, we're not getting rid of the dark side. We want to outbalance the dark side.
And then use that as, I always talk about the balance between light and dark as a sense of the dark then creates this, a propulsion for the light and opens up the call for the light. So I can hold on to that in that way. Thus far, it has worked out. But, we will see. But I think that's exactly what we want to transmit to young folks about the fact that is the hard-earned wisdom that we all have.
Super. Yes, and please send people to KarenSands.com and very soon to AgelessWay.com. I would love it.
We will. No, totally. We will. And again, thank you for everything that you were doing, Karen. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you for spending some time with us. I know it's precious. So thank you. And we will stay in touch. And, I never wanted a mentor. I wouldn't say I've never wanted, but mentors have not really been a big role in my life. But I'm like, if I was going to pick one, I'm like, I want her. She's good.
Then I want you as a mentee then.
Well, I was going to say, I think by at least osmosis, I might be like, drawing on all of this infectious brilliance and energy and passion that you have. So thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. Bye-bye.